Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own family? Like every achievement you've earned disappears the moment you cross the threshold of your childhood home. My name is Eliza, and I once ran into live fire to save children I didn't know, but couldn't get my own mother to say she was proud. This isn't just a story of war. It's the quiet kind of war that happens around dinner tables, in cold guest rooms, behind strained smiles. I wore a uniform not for applause, but because I knew how to keep someone alive with a bare hand and a tourniquet. And yet, at home, I was just the girl who ruined Thanksgiving. But something happened, something no one expected. And the shift? It didn't come from them. It came from a moment of truth loud enough to silence decades of doubt. Stay with me, because you may recognize pieces of yourself in this journey. The driveway still had the same crack running through it. Funny how something so small could make time fold in on itself. One step onto the pavement and I was 13 again, holding a casserole dish I didn't want to bring to a dinner I didn't belong at. Only this time, my boots made a sound, low, heavy, deliberate. The kind of sound you can't pretend not to hear. I parked on the street, not because I had to, but because I knew it would avoid a scene. The same scene every year. Don't block the driveway, don't take someone else's spot, don't take up space. The front porch light flickered above me, casting shadows across the door. That light had always blinked like a warning. I used to think it was broken. Now I think it's honest. I knocked. Not because I didn't have a key, but because it gave them time. Time to brace. Time to rehearse polite smiles. Time to hope I'd worn something normal. The door opened. No hug, no welcome back. Just eyes that drifted down to what I wore. Not a dress, not heels, just my uniform, the one I earned. The one they've never understood. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and cleaning spray. The holiday kind of clean. Sterile. Staged. The kind of clean you do when you're more worried about judgment than comfort. I stepped in and was already too loud. My presence cracked the silence in ways no one wanted to acknowledge. A half-hearted greeting, a comment about arriving early, a glance that lingered a beat too long. I've seen wounded soldiers hide pain better. At the dinner table, my name sat on a card. Not my name exactly. My rank. That's how they refer to me now. A title. A placeholder. Not a daughter. Not a sister. Just someone who doesn't fit in the photo. I tried to share something real, a moment that still wakes me up at night. A little girl I carried through a burning village. She had broken ribs and a cracked smile. I wanted to tell them she reminded me what humanity sounds like when everything else has gone quiet. But before I could even reach the part where the missile hit, someone cleared their throat. No bombs at dinner. It's Thanksgiving, remember? So I nodded, chewed, swallowed stories like they were dry stuffing, laughed at jokes that didn't land, sat beside people I share blood with, and still felt like a stranger. Later that night, I stepped outside. The yard hadn't changed. Same patchy grass, same tree that dropped leaves like secrets. I looked up at the sky, hoping the stars would offer some clarity. They didn't. The house behind me buzzed with laughter, warm, full, unburdened. They laughed like they'd never questioned who belonged, like no one had ever been asked to shrink to fit. I stood still, not bitter, not angry, just tired. Tired of pretending this place ever saw me. Tired of hoping one holiday might be different. Tired of walking into rooms where my silence makes everyone more comfortable than my truth. I slept in the guest room, the one with no photos, no warmth, no memory of me ever belonging there. It smelled like lemon and distance. In the morning, no one said much. One left for golf. One mentioned errands. Another asked if I'd be around next year like it was a choice. I packed without a sound, zipped the bag I'd carried through desert air and gunfire. The same bag that once held gauze, syringes, and someone's last hope. Here, it held socks and disappointment. As I closed the door behind me, I didn't expect anyone to follow. And no one did. On the drive back, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because there's a difference between sadness and clarity. Sadness wants to fix things. Clarity accepts they won't be fixed. That house never saw me, not really. It saw the girl who didn't play nice, who didn't fit the mold, who didn't become a reflection of what they thought love should look like. And still, I kept going back, because part of me thought maybe this time, they'd see me. Now I know better. Some places don't hold your story. They only echo what they need to believe. So you leave, not to escape, but because somewhere else, you've already built a home out of the truth they refuse to hold. Growing up, there was always one star in the house, and it wasn't me. He could throw a spiral by age 8. That alone made him a legend. People said he was born for greatness. Teachers, coaches, neighbors, even the pastor built sermons around his football stats. The fridge belonged to him, his jerseys, his report cards, his future. Me? I wasn't exactly spotlight material. I liked quiet things. I'd dig in the backyard for bugs, fascinated by their legs, their armor. I'd sneak radios from the garage and pull them apart just to see if I could put them back together. I didn't dream of prom. I dreamed of pressure bandages, adrenaline, field rescue protocols. While the girls practiced cheer routines, I memorized the human circulatory system. I told them once, just once, that I wanted to be a combat medic. My father laughed like I'd said I wanted to join the circus. My mother blinked and asked if I'd meant nursing, or maybe cosmetology, something practical, something safe. They didn't get it, they didn't ask to. They saw a girl with too many questions, too much fire, not enough polish. Every family dinner felt like a performance I didn't audition for. I was always the odd one out. My voice either too loud or too quiet. My questions dismissed. My stories cut short by a reminder to let someone else talk. Eventually, I stopped offering anything. I became background. At school, I found spaces to breathe, library corners, biology labs, gym storage rooms when I needed to cry without being asked what was wrong. I'd tape diagrams of organs to my wall while everyone else hung boy band posters. They called it a phase. They said I was just going through something. But what I was going through had nothing to do with rebellion. It was clarity. I saw what I was made of, even if they didn't. The older I got, the more obvious the lines became. He got the applause, the support, the backpats and speeches. I got reminders to smile more, to not be so intense, to think about how I'd look in family photos. It wasn't hatred. It was worse than that. It was erasure. They couldn't see who I was becoming because they never truly saw me to begin with. They only saw the girl who quit piano, who didn't bring dates home, who didn't conform, who made things awkward by not pretending. So I stopped pretending. I made a decision, quiet, clean, final. On my 18th birthday, I enlisted. No big announcement, no sit-down conversation, just a form on the kitchen counter and a bedroom left spotless behind me. I didn't even take a suitcase, just my bag and a spine built from every moment I sat quietly in my own house, waiting to be noticed. There was no goodbye, not from them, just a text from him. 2 words. Why, though? And maybe at the time I didn't know exactly why. Maybe it wasn't to prove them wrong. Maybe it wasn't even about war. Maybe I just needed to become something undeniable. I didn't cry. Not that day. Not even in boot camp when my legs gave out or when I held someone's simulated chest wound closed for 6 minutes straight with my bare hands. I didn't cry when my uniform got soaked in sweat and mock blood or when the instructors shouted inches from my face, because crying felt like admission that I'd wanted their love and didn't get it. So I got sharper. I got quieter. I got better. Every time I was pushed aside, I learned how to take up space in silence. Every time I was doubted, I trained harder. I carried that invisibility like armor, and in that quiet, I found something else. Not hate, not bitterness, purpose. Because while they were teaching me I didn't belong, the world was teaching me what I was capable of, and I was just getting started. Some choices happen slowly, over time. like water shaping stone. Others strike like lightning. Mine was both. I'd known for years that I didn't belong in that house, but knowing and acting are two very different things. You can live years between realization and movement. But something about turning 18 made everything sharp, like time had expired on waiting to be accepted. So I didn't ask for permission. I just went. That morning was quiet. I got up before anyone else, packed the essentials, cleaned the room like I was erasing my existence. The bed was made tight. The desk was bare. I even took down the old drawing I'd taped to the closet door. No sentimental note, no dramatic goodbye. Just the sound of my bag zippering closed and a single envelope on the kitchen counter with my enlistment papers inside. No one was awake when I left. That silence felt familiar, not cruel, just indifferent. I didn't expect applause, but part of me thought they'd call, ask where I was going, maybe try to stop me. But the phone stayed silent. Boot camp was the loudest place I'd ever been, yet somehow it felt more honest than my house had in years. Every day was designed to break you down. Yelling, sweat, mud, sleep deprivation, push-ups until your arms trembled. We trained in every condition, from freezing rain to desert sun, and if your emotions got the better of you, you were told to get over it. But strangely, I didn't struggle with that. I had spent years practicing how to be still when I wasn't okay. I already knew how to stay composed when I felt invisible. So while others were breaking, I was steady, quiet, focused. And for the first time in my life, that mattered. I wasn't competing for approval based on how I looked or who I dated or how well I blended in. I was measured by how I moved under pressure, by how I listened, reacted, held the line. Those things I knew how to do. We learned to treat trauma with whatever we had. A torn shirt, a broken stick, our bare hands. I learned how to stop bleeding in seconds, how to breathe through panic, how to triage when every second counted. And I loved it, not because I loved pain or war, but because I finally felt useful, like I had purpose, like I could walk into a situation and make it better just by being prepared. I remember the first time I had to stabilize a simulated injury with nothing but gauze and instinct. The instructor said, "You either save the life or you don't." I did, and something clicked. This was where I was meant to be. Not in a floral living room where people judged your worth by your posture at the dinner table. Not in a world of pearl necklaces and subtle sighs. But here, where life and death demanded presence, not performance. Still, even then I thought maybe they'd reach out. Maybe someone would say they were proud, that they saw me. But weeks turned into months. Letters never came. Birthdays passed like skipped songs. Holidays arrived with no sign of acknowledgement. And somehow that made me stronger too. Because I started to realize something. Their silence wasn't a verdict. It was a reflection of their limits, not mine. They couldn't see me, not really, but that didn't mean I wasn't there. I was. I was learning, growing, earning every stripe on my sleeve. And while they measured success in holiday cards and job titles, I measured mine in split-second decisions that kept hearts beating. One day, after a grueling field drill, a bunkmate asked me what pushed me to enlist. I told her the truth, because I got tired of shrinking. That night, under fluorescent lights and concrete ceilings, I wrote a letter I never sent. It said, "I didn't leave to make you proud. I left so I could finally hear myself think. And that's the difference. Some people leave to escape. I left to become." The first time I heard real gunfire, it didn't sound like I expected. It wasn't loud at first. It was sharp, fast, distant, then close, then everywhere. I'd been training for months, prepared for the sound of chaos. But nothing prepares you for the way your own heartbeat drowns out every other thought when it's not a drill anymore. The air in Afghanistan felt dry enough to snap. We were called in on a late afternoon, something about an ambush site, wounded scattered. I remember the dust, the heat, the metallic scent of adrenaline before the first scream hit the air. That was the day I stopped being a soldier in training and became a medic. Everything else faded. The noise, the shouting, the sense of time. There was only one thing I could see clearly. A man on the ground, blood pulsing through the dirt beneath him. His name was Alvarez. He was 19. He kept whispering, "Don't tell my mom." And I kept whispering back, "She's going to hear your voice herself. Just stay with me." He was missing most of his left leg. My hands moved faster than I thought they could. Tourniquet, pressure, monitor breathing, reassure, repeat. We were under fire the whole time. I don't even remember ducking. It's like my brain knew fear wasn't useful right then. Not yet. He lived. We got him out. And later, I found out my hands had left bruises from holding him so tightly. I wore those bruises like medals. That night, I sat alone in the dark of our tent and cried for the first time since boot camp. Not because of the blood, not because of the pain, but because I had finally become something I never thought I could be. Essential. Not in the way families mean it, not like being the planner of Thanksgiving or the one who brings the casserole, but in the way that if I hadn't been there, someone would have died. And still, no one back home knew. There was no phone call, no letter. I didn't tell them. Part of me didn't want to. I already knew what they'd say. Why put yourself in danger? Why didn't someone else do it? You're lucky it wasn't worse. It's strange when you start to feel more seen in a war zone than in your childhood home. When fellow soldiers trust your judgment more than your own parents ever did. When your brothers in arms call you Doc with respect you've never heard in your last name. That's when the ghost begins to form. Not the kind that haunts others, the kind that learns to float through life unseen. Not bitter, not broken, just quiet. In every deployment after that, I got sharper. Learned to spot arterial bleeds in seconds. Could pack a wound in the dark while barking vitals and dodging mortar fire. I learned which painkillers to ration and how to improvise a stretcher with a belt and a broken door. People started calling me the calm in the chaos. But I wasn't calm because I wasn't scared. I was calm because fear was a luxury I couldn't afford, especially not when a child was involved. One mission. We hit a village just after a strike. The air was thick with smoke and screams. I found a girl, 7, maybe 8, half buried under rubble, ribs cracked, eyes wide. I carried her 2 miles to a field clinic, whispering words I wasn't even sure she understood. She smiled through broken lips when we got there. That smile still lives in my bones. But when I told my mother, later, over a holiday meal, I didn't get past "there was a little girl" before she cut me off. Let's not talk about bombs during dinner. And so I stopped trying. I carried all of it silently. The missions, the scars, the names of the people I helped save, and the ones I didn't. And the longer I served, the more I realized something most civilians don't understand. You don't become hardened by war. You become precise. You learn how to move in the world like a scalpel. Sharp, necessary, clean. But you also learn something else. You can stitch someone together with the same hands that hold your own wounds closed. You can save others while slowly disappearing yourself. And that's how the ghost survives, by being useful, even when invisible. Coming home is supposed to be a relief. That's what they say anyway. You survive the tours, you finish the job, and then you get to come back, to family, to rest, to comfort. But what they don't tell you is how jarring it is to return to a place that feels more foreign than the battlefield ever did. I came home on leave once, just a week, no fanfare, no announcement, just curiosity. A test, really, to see if anything had changed. The house looked the same beige walls, same careful decorations, same porch light still flickering like a secret no one wanted to fix. Inside, my brother had another promotion to talk about, a new car, a new wife, a baby on the way. The same spotlight he'd always had just kept getting brighter. No one asked me much. My dad mentioned I looked tired, then launched into a story about someone he met at the golf course. My mom offered eye cream, like fatigue was a cosmetic flaw. They didn't ask where I'd been, or who I helped, or what it meant to crawl through broken buildings with a bleeding child in your arms. So I said nothing. And honestly, silence was easier. It required less translation, fewer corrections when someone called me a nurse instead of a medic, less explaining why I didn't just wear something nice instead of a uniform when I arrived. I stayed 2 nights in the guest room, the one with no photos, no warmth, and a comforter that still smelled like lemon cleaner and distance. There was no welcome back banner, no thank you, just a passing comment about how maybe it was time I considered doing something safer, something more stable. They said it like my work was a phase, like saving lives under fire was just a detour before settling into a real career. I nodded. I smiled. I even said I'd think about it. Then I packed my bag and left without saying goodbye. And I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I already knew home wasn't where I'd find understanding. Not with them. Not in that house. It's strange, the moment you realize you don't need their validation anymore. You keep chasing it, thinking one more holiday, one more family dinner, one more chance to be seen. But then it hits you. You were never going to be who they needed. And maybe that's okay. I'd been trained to keep people alive in the worst conditions imaginable, to hold arteries shut with my bare hands, to stop panic with steady breaths. I'd learned to be calm while chaos screamed all around me. And yet, in that house, none of it mattered. In that house, I was still the girl who quit piano, the one who didn't bring home a husband, the one who ruined the photo symmetry by showing up in boots. The truth is, you can carry medals in your pocket and still be told you're not enough at the dinner table. But you know what's worse? You start to believe it, until one day, you don't. You realize that your worth isn't measured by their applause, that the silence isn't a verdict, it's just the space where their imagination ends. They never imagined a daughter like me, so I stopped waiting for them to. When I got back to base, one of the newer medics asked what home felt like after deployment. I told him the truth. It feels like wearing someone else's name tag, like trying to blend into wallpaper that never matched your colors to begin with. And yet, for a long time, I kept going back, hoping, wondering, waiting. But the more I returned, the more I saw it clearly. Home isn't where you were born. Home is where you're understood, where your silence is read as strength, not rudeness, where your scars aren't edited out of the story. And that place? I hadn't found it yet, but I knew one thing. It wasn't there. The invitation came in the mail like it was typed by a stranger. No dear, no warm note, just my rank printed in bold on the envelope, like that was the only way they knew how to address me now. It was for my brother's wedding, black tie, Napa RSVP required. Every detail polished, curated, perfect. I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I did. I knew what it meant. You can come. But not all of you. Not the part that makes things uncomfortable. Not the part that doesn't match the Instagram color palette. I could hear her voice in my head before I even arrived. You're not going to wear that, are you? But I did. I wore my dress uniform, not to make a statement, not to start a fight, but because I wasn't willing to erase myself for the sake of someone else's seating chart. When I stepped out of the rental car, heads turned, some curious, some cautious. The valet hesitated before taking the keys, a glance at my ribbons, a soft, "Thank you for your service," like he wasn't sure what else to say. Inside, the venue was stunning. Ivory tablecloths, crystal glasses, roses in vases that probably cost more than my monthly housing allowance. Everything was perfect, except me. My mother saw me from across the room. Her smile froze mid-lift. She walked over, pearls at her neck, dressed the shade of politeness. "You wore that?" I nodded, calm, steady. There wasn't a dress code that excluded national service. She flinched, recovered, smiled again. "We just didn't want to draw too much attention. It's your brother's day, after all. Of course. Wouldn't want combat ribbons pulling focus from cufflinks." My father offered me a drink I didn't ask for. My brother gave me a nod like I was a colleague he once worked with. That's all I got. No one asked how I was. No one asked what I'd seen, who I'd saved, what it cost. To them, I was still the one who didn't smile enough in childhood photos, the one who ruined family brunches by having opinions, the one who never quite got the feminine thing right. At the reception, I stood near the back, out of the way. A cousin asked me what I actually did. I told them. Blunt. Simple. I triage trauma under fire. I decide who gets saved first. I stop bleeding with my hands. They blinked, then laughed. Not mockingly, just surprised. Damn, I thought you were just angry all the time. That's kind of badass. I nodded. It is. And then came the moment I never saw coming. A tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there he was. Older, stature like steel, surrounded by security, the president. He extended his hand and looked me in the eye. "You're the medic from the convoy rescue. I've read the file." He said I had changed combat triage protocol, that survival rates had gone up because of my decisions, that my courage had saved more lives than some entire units, and he said it in front of everyone. My mother, my father, my brother, every aunt who called me too intense, every uncle who asked if I was ever going to settle down. The room went quiet, not awkward quiet, reverent quiet, and in that stillness something broke, not in me, around me, the narrative. For the first time, someone with power said aloud what I had always known but never heard from the people who raised me, that I mattered, that I did something extraordinary, and they couldn't ignore it. Not now. Not with cameras flashing and applause rising and history being rewritten in real time. I didn't cry, not then, because that moment wasn't about emotion. It was about truth, not the soft kind whispered at bedtime, the kind you say into a microphone so no one can pretend they missed it. When the formal photo was announced, I began to step back like I always had. Then I heard it. "Excuse me, miss. Are you the soldier? We need you front and center." My mother opened her mouth to object, but the president was already beside me. I think this family's most decorated member belongs in the middle, don't you? And just like that, I stood at the center of a photo I was never meant to be in, not because they let me, but because I had earned it. Before the photo, before the wedding, before the handshakes and applause, there was Kandahar, and it changed everything. We were tasked with clearing a route that had become an ambush trap. Intelligence said there might be an IED under an old fruit stand. A drone sweep showed nothing. We moved. The first explosion came behind us. It took out the rear convoy in a ball of fire. Our Humvee jolted sideways like it had been kicked by a giant. My head hit the window hard. The world rang like a broken bell. Static, screams, smoke. When I crawled out, blood was already soaking through a lieutenant's thigh. Our driver was gone. The gunner unconscious. The air was so thick with sand and soot I could barely breathe. And that's when I heard it. Not shouting, not orders. A child's cry. It pierced everything. Thin, fragile, real. Over comms, the order was clear. Do not approach the civilians. We don't know the threat level. Hold your position. But I couldn't, because I saw her, curled behind a crate no more than 8, blood on her cheek, holding something wrapped in cloth. I didn't know if it was a doll, a blanket, or a baby, and I didn't care. I ran across 150 meters of open chaos. Bullets hissed past like angry insects. One tore the strap off my pack. Another kicked up gravel inches from my boot. I didn't stop. I dropped beside her, checked the bundle, an infant, barely breathing. She had burns and a broken arm. I wrapped them both in my jacket, whispered that they were safe, and called for evac. No response. So I carried them. Through smoke, through gunfire, through a street where nothing was standing but instinct and fire. A Marine covered me from behind a wrecked Humvee. I made it to the fallback zone, lungs on fire, legs giving out. Both kids lived. So did I. But when the dust settled, I was called into the command tent. You disobeyed a direct order. I didn't argue. I nodded. Said, yes, sir. You jeopardized your team. With respect, sir, no one else was moving. He exhaled. Long, tight, tired. You're not a hero, Sergeant. You're lucky. We can't build protocol on luck. And just like that, the record wasn't spotless anymore. They didn't demote me, but they marked it. A quiet note in my file. Unpredictable. That night, someone slipped a folded note onto my bunk. Because of you, there are 2 fewer graves in this country. Thank you. No name. Just a bloody fingerprint in the corner. Later, I'd hear that the footage from a helmet cam made it up the chain, that it was shown in a briefing room in D.C., that someone important watched it in silence and said, find her. But at the time, all I knew was the sound of that girl's breathing in my ear, the weight of her brother against my chest, the blur of movement when I wasn't supposed to move. I didn't tell my family, not because it wasn't worth telling, but because I already knew how it would land. My father would say I was reckless. My mother would ask if it was a sign I should come home. And my brother, he wouldn't reply at all. So I carried it alone. But it stayed with me. Not as trauma, as clarity. Because for all the ceremonies and speeches that came later, for all the attention and applause, that moment in Kandahar was when I truly understood what courage was. It's not about rank. It's not about orders. It's not about waiting for someone to say go. It's about moving when no one else will. It's about saving someone simply because you can. Even if no one ever finds out. Even if they do and call it a mistake. That's what war taught me. Not how to fight, but how to choose. The photo made it to the news. Not front page, not national coverage, but enough to ripple. President honors combat medic at private family event. A caption, a few paragraphs, and a picture where I stand. Sharp lines, polished boots, surrounded by people who once asked me to sit in the back row. I didn't post it. Someone else did. But after that, the messages started coming. From old classmates, from strangers, from women who said they'd served or wanted to or never dared. From mothers asking how to raise daughters who wouldn't feel like they had to shrink. From nurses wondering how to move from hospitals to battlefield tents. From kids who'd seen the footage and just wanted to know how I stayed calm. And buried in all of it, one message stood out, 2 words. I'm sorry. It was from my brother. I didn't write back, not because I was angry, but because forgiveness doesn't always come with a reply. Sometimes the act of being seen is enough. Weeks later, I was back at Walter Reed, watching new recruits fumble through pressure bandages. One of them, nervous and wide-eyed, looked up and asked if I was the medic from that rescue video. I nodded. But I'm also the one who will fail you if you don't learn to wrap that gauze properly. They laughed. I laughed too, not politely, not carefully, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere real, somewhere healed. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at my uniform, the one I wore to the wedding, the one I earned stitch by stitch, tour by tour, breath by breath. It still held the scent of ceremony and dust, of blood and lavender, of truth. For a long time, that uniform was a shield, proof that I mattered, even if no one at home believed it, a symbol of what I built when everything else tried to erase me. But now, it's more than that. It's not about proving anything, it's about remembering that I didn't grow into myself. Despite them, I grew into myself because of what they couldn't see, because of what they couldn't love, and still, I did it anyway. I think about the girl I carried in Syria, the soldier I pulled from rubble, the 2 children in Kandahar, the recruits I now train to run toward the fire, not from it. I think about all the quiet lives I've touched, and I realize something. I never needed the center of the photo. I never needed the applause. I just needed to believe I was enough. And I do. Not because of the president, not because of medals or headlines, not even because of that photo, but because I stood in the middle of fire, of silence, of rejection, and I kept showing up. So when people ask me who I am now, I don't lead with my title. I say I'm someone who learned how to bleed and still walk forward. Someone who was called too much, too intense, too hard, and turned all of that into survival. Someone who became whole not because I was finally accepted, but because I stopped waiting to be. That's the real story. Not about revenge, not even about recognition. It's about release. The moment you realize your life is already full, even if the people you wanted it from the most never noticed. And if someone out there hears this and feels that ache, that need to be seen, I'll tell you what I wish someone had told me a long time ago. You don't need permission to be extraordinary. You just need to stand in your truth long enough for the noise to fade. And when it does, what's left is you, unshaken, unapologetic, whole. Sometimes the people who were supposed to love you first are the last to see you clearly. You can spend years trying to earn their approval, twisting yourself into softer shapes, smaller voices, quieter victories, hoping that one day they'll notice the truth of who you've become. But the hardest lesson, and the most freeing one, is this. You don't need to be seen by everyone to matter. The world is filled with people who measure worth by comfort, by tradition, by what fits easily into a photo. And when you don't fit that mold, they'll try to ignore the brilliance you carry simply because it makes them uncomfortable. But you, your story, your strength, your scars, are not defined by their silence. You're defined by the lives you've touched, the fires you've walked through, and the courage it took to keep showing up even when no one clapped. And sometimes the loudest validation comes not from applause, but from the quiet peace of knowing you chose the hard road and still became someone whole. Let them misunderstand you. Let them stay in their comfort zones. You have work to do. Because the world doesn't need more people who conform. It needs more people who become exactly who they are without asking for permission. If this story spoke to something in you, if it reminded you of a time you felt unseen, unrecognized, or underestimated, I want to thank you for staying with me to the end. It means more than you know. Stories like this aren't easy to tell, but they're even harder to live. And if you've carried that weight of being the black sheep, the overlooked one, the too much or never enough, I see you. Truly. If something in this journey resonated, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what part hit home, or just drop a word that captures how you feel right now. Your voice matters here. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. There are more stories like this, raw, real, and rooted in truth, and I'd be honored to share them with you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone strong who forgot how powerful they really are, please share it with them. You never know how much healing can come from hearing you're not alone. Thanks for being part of this moment. Stay brave, stay grounded, and never let anyone tell you your fire is too much. It's exactly what this world needs.